Our guest is Schmeeka Simpson.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Miss Simpson, since
Yes.
Josette told us that he met you, we were excited to have this talk. And welcome to our AES Sports Legacy channel. It is a great honor to have you here with us in this very special month. Malcon X's birthday was May 19th. In
Yes.
Brazil, in Brazil, it is the month we discuss the consequence after the abolition of slavery. For our audience to get to know you better, please tell us who is Shamika Jamila Simpson?
Usually my mama calls me by my middle name. So um, hi, I'm Schmeeka Simpson. I'm a homeschooling mom of three. I am a community activist and organizer. I do a lot of political and community work here in North Omaha and across the state of Nebraska. I'm a Creighton University graduate, dual degreed. I'm not working in my field, but I realized that all knowledge, is relevant to whatever it is that you want to do in life. So I'm appreciative of my formal, quote unquote, education. I've been with the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation since 2014 when Mike Brown was killed. I That was kind of like my wake up call as far as racial and social justice issues go. I came to the Malcolm X Foundation without ever having been here before, because I needed to do something. I just wanted to do something. I felt like something needed to be done. And I've always been kind of the go-getter type. So I decided to do it myself. And I had went searching online looking for something to do, somewhere to go, something to join. And I had found that a group of like white college students were putting together this rally on behalf of Mike Brown on like the busiest street in Omaha. And it was completely disorganized. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what they was doing. They didn't have no speakers in mind or anything like that. So I joined with them and I told them, I would help kind of organize that. And I went to the Malcolm X Foundation and I found our board president, Leo Lewis, doing a town hall on Mike Brown. So I asked him and several of the other speakers to join me at this rally, and they did. There was about 3,000 to 4,000 people that all lined the streets of Omaha, Nebraska. And I think I sent you maybe one of my photos with me and my afro with the fist up. Maybe I didn't, but that picture was taken at that particular rally. And I remember walking up because we came early to kind of scope out the area and see, how much police presence and everything. And there was no less than 6 different type of different police entities, everything from Douglas County Sheriff to National Guard to Nebraska State Patrol to Omaha PD. The police chief walked up to us and was like, so we checked out your list of speakers and everybody's good but Leo. Leo has been known to be an agitator and we feel like he's going to get the crowd riled up. And I was like, yes, I picked the right one. That's what I'm talking about. They also told us that they had snipers on the roof. So we literally held a rally with snipers pointing at us on behalf of Mike Brown, and that was in 2014. And my activism hasn't stopped since. During the George Floyd riots, I went to Minneapolis to provide support for protesters at the 5th Precinct. Ended up spending a night in jail there, well, 14 hours in jail there. I've ran political campaigns. I help with homeschooling co-ops. I do, whatever I can that I believe is going to help enrich our community, because I believe that that's what our job is on this earth. I grew up with the 2-parent home, my mom and my dad. My dad's a minister, so I'm a preacher's daughter. But I went through a lot of abuse, so I ended up in the streets a lot. I ended up in jail from about 10 to 19, different jails all over the state. I had dropped out of school and got my GED, and I was really just on a really bad path when I realized that I was a very intelligent woman and I didn't have to act that way. And, I worked through a lot of my trauma. And when I found the Malcon X Foundation, I really found a place I could call home. And they've been, here as a stable force and a stabilizing presence in the community and the voice of the community since 1970, really, when Rowena Moore founded this place. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to share my story and to share Malcolm's story. And thank you for having me.
Well, we are so thank you for accepting our invitation, because the goal of our channel is to create a critical mass through debate, education, information, and entertainment if it is possible as well, because we are human beings and sometimes we need to entertain.
Of course.
And we would like to hear from you. What led you to choose as a profession to have a bachelor degrees in science and business administration and health administration?
Well, holistic health is a big deal for me. I feel like, particularly here in the United States, they are trying to kill us slowly through food. Through food and medications. None of these things have been or shown themselves to be sustainable or healthy for the American people. So when I looked into healthcare, I know I didn't want to be a doctor or anything like that. Health administration deals with the administration of health. And it actually isn't the administration of health, it's the administration of the money behind the healthcare system. So when I realized that the whole healthcare, quote unquote, system is profit driven, it seemed to me that if I wanted to make any difference in health, that I would need to understand the sides of finance and administration. And so that's why I took administration in health administration and policy. Policy is also a big thing, not just in health, but of course, just legally across the board. Policy is what's going to impact how the system interacts with you. And understanding that to me was very important. And even though I am not working in those fields, just like I said, the information and the education that I received through Creighton helps me to understand policy at a legislative level if I'm doing any kind of legislative work or civil activism. Business administration was important to me because I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Right now, I am the owner and operator of a nonprofit called Omaha Youth Art Collective. I also operate a corresponding LLC called OYAC, which just stands for Omaha Youth Art Collective. I help other people with their businesses. I do tax work. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and I do a little bit of everything. And those degrees have helped me understand business and, like I said, policy in a more in-depth way that you wouldn't know if you didn't attend school.
As a multitask woman we can call you a joker on the game because we can put you in everywhere.
I'm a wild card. You ain't lying. That's
Ready?
true.
Ready?
It's better wild card, yes.
I'm a wild card.
She's
Okay.
ready.
Miss Schmeeka,
Yes.
according to our research, because you have a department, we went to research you about you to understand about you. I think you touched a little bit before because you know that you have many activity within political activism and as well social activism.
Mhm.
Could you tell us when you understood 100% you should act as an activist?
Okay. Can I tell you 100% what now? I'm sorry.
I said, I'd like to understand from you when you understood in yourself when you should act as an activist. When was that decision made?
Um, well, my original, to be honest, I've always been kind of an activist. I mean, I'm pro-choice now, but back in the day when I was like super Christian and super religious, I have pictures of standing on the same street that I held that rally at with anti-abortion signs when I was like 16. And growing up in group homes and through the system, I've always been kind of an advocate for those I felt were being mistreated. So activism, I think, has kind of always been in my system. I just didn't know how to really channel it or had like a way or a support system that I could channel it with or through. I started my first act of activism with the Mike Brown rally. And then from there, it's just whatever I feel is on my heart. I feel like if something bothers me, if there's something that makes me angry or sad, then it's my job to change that. Once again, if I want to see change in the world, then I have to be the change. And so whenever I act upon something, it's because it's touched me in some way, and I couldn't just sit there and just let it happen. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I got it. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jose.
Well, Schmeeka, as mentioned earlier, the month of May is the month that we discuss about the consequence of the day after the abolition of slavery in Brazil. I don't know if you know that, but the
I
month
did not
of
know that. He
okay,
told me a little bit about it was the Brazilian Independence Day. Is that correct?
it was the abolition day. It was May 13th.
Okay.
And then we still feel the consequences of that the next day, the May 14th. It's presence in our days. That's why your
Of course.
presence here is that's why your presence here is very important.
Thank
But
you.
but beside that, I know you mentioned a little bit, but when did you start actually your activities as a guide tour of Malcon X Memorial Museum in Omaha, Nebraska?
Omaha, Nebraska, of course, is the birth site of Malcolm X. I started working with Malcolm X in 2014. I started my duties as the director of tours in June of last year, June 18th, actually, to be exact. So that's when I started working here in an official capacity as the director of tours.
All right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Just a year. You brand new there, 1 year.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
here in an official capacity as 1 year. I've also been a radio show hostess. Our radio station here, Mind and Soul Radio 101.3 FM. Me and another activist in the community, his name was Doug Patterson. We had our radio show. It's called Doug and Mika. We did that for about 3 years, which was pretty popular. And that was here at Malcolm X. And then, like I said, I've been involved with a lot of activism around the center, but I've never been employed here, officially, as they're my employer. I've been a self-contracted employer for the last 4 to 5 years. I made a decision I was never going to work for white people again in 2018. I had did a political campaign, and the amount of racism in that campaign, while they expected me to garner the black vote for them, just made me sick to my stomach. And so I was like, I'm never going to work for white people again. So I became a self-contractor in 2019, and I worked with Malcon X on some self-contracts, on some contracts as a contractor and the contractee with the community center here. And they actually just made me an employee this year. So I was actually a self-contractor with them all through 2018, or actually 2021, excuse me, last year. And then this year, they hired me on as their permanent tour director and as an employee of the Malcon X Foundation.
Congratulations, congratulations.
Oh, congratulations, and thank you so much to share your experience.
Thank you. Are you two brothers, Edno and Adriano?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Are y'all twins?
No, I'm
Oh,
older.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
I'm sorry. I mean, y'all look like brothers, and then I noticed the last names were the same, so okay.
All right. Well, fortunately, we had the opportunity to be in touch with you through Jose, because he's a coach in Bellevue University in Nebraska. He visited the museum, and through him, we from AES Sports Legacy Channel were able to contact you, and he tried to describe to us a little bit about his visit over there. But however, for us and for everyone who are watching our program that wants to know a little bit more about the museum, could you tell us what was the racial situation in the state of Nebraska in the early 20th century? To be more specific, in 1900.
Okay, be happy to answer that. Across the United States, specifically in the 1900s, racism was definitely a way of life. It was not something that you would see periodically here or there. As a matter of fact, it was such a way of life, it wasn't even newsworthy, right? A black man could be lynched, a black woman could be lynched, and it wouldn't even make the news in many places because that's just how things were. So in the 1900s, 1919, to be specific, the Red Summer of 1919, in Omaha, Nebraska, is when Will Brown was lynched. Is anyone here familiar with Will Brown or his story at all? Nope.
No.
Okay. I'm going to show you a picture of Will Brown and his body after he had been lynched. This is actually considered one of the worst lynchings here in the United States, right after Medgar Evers and Emmett Till. You've heard of those young men?
I know there was those two.
Will Brown was a black man that was actually innocently traveling through Omaha when he met his demise. I don't know if
Put it in front of you, you'll be able to see it. If you put exactly in front of you, on it, right there, there you go.
Can you see?
Yeah, he's been burned.
Yes, there's a group of white men surrounding the remains of what you can't tell, but that is a black man being burnt on a pile of wood. What happened here is that Will Brown was falsely accused of sexually assaulting a white woman by the name of Agnes Lobuck and her boyfriend. He actually could not have physically done that because he had severe rheumatoid arthritis. So at this point, it was just basically a witch hunt to find a black man who would fit a noose. In this book, particularly, The Dead Are Rising, they give a very detailed and descriptive account of what happened to him. And also, they say at the end of this chapter that most likely it was a white man in blackface that had been hired by political gurus to stir up dissension during political times. So most likely a white man painted black is the one that did this, but they're not sure, right? So Will Brown, innocently traveling through Omaha, Nebraska, falsely accused of sexually assaulting a white woman, was actually taken to jail by the police and hid there from the mob that had formed to find him. A group of schoolboys actually started this mob, and ended up swelling till it was several thousand people outside of the courthouse demanding Will Brown's head. The mayor refused to turn Will Brown over twice. And each time they tried to lynch the mayor, literally put a rope around a white man. This mob was that crazy to put a rope around this white man's neck, their mayor, and lynch him. When the police chief got him away from the lynch mob, they got him again and tried to lynch him again. They shot up the courthouse. There are bullet holes in the courthouse to this day that you can go and see where the mob unleashed gunfire. And they finally sent the mayor a note saying that they were going to actually burn the courthouse down, and it didn't matter who was in it, whether white, black, police, or janitors, if they did not release Will Brown to the crowd. So the mayor decided that that was a sacrifice he was willing to make, someone else's life, and released Will Brown, where they immediately lynched him. They shot him over 100 times while he was hanging in the air. They took him down and tied him to the back of a vehicle and dragged him through the streets of East Omaha, downtown Omaha. And then the picture that I showed you with Will Brown burning is what happened to his remains. And that was the last breath that Will Brown took. It also should be noted that they took pieces of the rope that they lynched him with and sold them off as souvenirs to people in the crowd. Also, what should be noted is that this is one of the only lynchings where these men that you see in the background, some of them were actually held accountable. Most lynchings didn't have any kind of legal repercussions to them because it was legal and fine to lynch a black man, a black woman, a black child. This lynching had legal repercussions attached to it simply because of the destruction to government property, because the mayor was lynched, because 2 police officers were shot. No one was ever held accountable for Will Brown's murder, and he was thrown in a grave that was simply marked lynched. Now, that was 1919. So in 1921, bringing it back to Malcolm X, when Earl Little and Louise Little, Malcolm's mother and father, Earl Little, Louise Little, when they came to Omaha, Nebraska in 1921, they were actually members and ambassadors of the UNIA, which is the Universal Negro Improvement Association, started by Marcus Garvey. They came here to set up a Nebraska chapter of the UNIA. And that wasn't specifically why they came here. They actually came here because they were causing a lot of heat in Georgia, where Earl Little was originally from and where that family was living at the time. And their family in Georgia thought that they had better leave Georgia before it got too hot for them and to come to Omaha, Nebraska. Well, as you follow Malcolm's life, you will see that everywhere they went, that heat followed them because of the racist climate that the United States had in general, and because of the work that Earl and Louise were doing on behalf of Black people and the Black community in the UNIA with Marcus Garvey's stamp of approval on it. In 1921, when the Little family came to Omaha, Nebraska, is also the first year that the KKK set up shop, the Ku Klux Klan. set up shop here in Omaha. Everybody knows what the Ku Klux Klan is, right? Great.
Right.
And so the Ku Klux Klan being, and we don't believe in white supremacy. So you won't ever hear me use the words white supremacist, because white people are not supreme. We have these racist white groups that would come together like the KKK, and set up shop here in Omaha. The KKK specifically set up shop in 1921 and grew to over 45,000 members, which was around, if I'm not mistaken, and let me make sure my numbers are right, I think that was 1/10 of the population at that time.
Wow. 1.1% of the population of the state of Omaha was in the KKK.
Mm. Let me double check those facts, because I don't want to give any misinformation, but I do believe 1921. So in the 1920s, the population of Omaha was 191,601 people. So 45,000 members of those were KKK members, and that's more than 1/10, if I'm not mistaken. $190,000 divided by 45,000. 190,000. Yep, so that was about 23% of the population. So looking at that and seeing that all of those people in that picture were probably affiliated with the KKK, and even if they weren't, they were racist, of course, to be lynching a black man for no reason, still shows the climate even today of Nebraska, because those individuals and their descendants are most likely still here teaching somewhere, being a judge, being a lawyer, being a pharmacist, being a doctor. And that kind of climate isn't easily wiped out. Nebraska is a red state, completely Republican, and I have no problem with Republicans, as a Republican. I don't have any problems with Republicans. I think that, as Malcolm X said, Republicans and Democrats are two wings of the same bird, and frankly, I have no use for either one of them. I feel that completely in every fiber of my soul. I'm an independent voter and an independent thinker. But this state has a history of being racist and still is. A lot of the activism that I've done has been on behalf of Black and brown children in school. And you also see some of the legislation they try to pass through the legislature, allowing teachers to conceal carry, allowing teachers to restrain your child to death. I mean, these are the kinds of legislation that they try to pass through our school system, when most of the public schools, particularly here in the inner city in Omaha, Nebraska, are filled with Black and brown children. And those children are the ones that are targeted the most with aggression from teachers, with suspensions, with expulsions. So Malcolm X and his family in the 1920s definitely had a rough time dealing with the KKK. The KKK is what ran Malcolm X and his family out of Omaha. They left in late 1926 because the KKK kept threatening to kill them, actually threatened Louise Little while she was pregnant with Malcolm, and her husband was away. That they would kill them if they didn't stop their activities that they were doing on behalf of the Black community. So that was the climate then, and unfortunately, that's still a lot of the climate now.
Wow.
Schmeeka,
Wow.
that's wow. This is amazing. It's a lot of information. So let's get back a little bit. I know you spoke a little bit about Marcus Garvey. You spoke about that he founded the UNIA, and then we know that he moved to the United States in 1960. Yes, 1916.
Okay.
But we would like to know, how much influence did Malcolm X receive from him, from Marcus Garvey?
If it was not for his mother and father being Garveyites, Malcolm, in my opinion, would not be who he is to who he was. The Garveyite message is one of basically the Garveyites and the NOI, of course, do not have the same exact message, but they share a lot of the same principles. Self-sufficiency is the main principle. Marcus Garvey was completely, oh, it says my computer's dying and I have it plugged in. Hold on, guys, give me a second. Can we cut, or I don't know?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it disappeared. Okay,
Here.
I'm ready. Sorry. Marcus Garvey is what, in my opinion, influenced Malcolm to even approach or embrace the NOI and accept their teachings. Once again, the NOI as a Black nationalist movement and the Marcus Garvey movement, the UNIA, is definitely a nationalist movement, Black nationalist movement, and they share a lot of the same principles of nationalism, Pan-Africanism, that Black people who are the descendants of enslaved people, because we do not call our people slaves, they were enslaved. Enslaved people are a nation of people unto ourselves, and that's from Omaha, Nebraska to Brazil. If you are the descendants of an enslaved person, you have the ability to be part of this beautiful nation of Black people who have the right to protect ourselves, we have the right to provide for ourselves, and we have the right to educate ourselves. Malcolm's father and mother were completely self-sufficient from the system. They owned land everywhere they went. Every time they could, they bought a house. They grew their own food. They had chickens. They canned food. They sold food. For the most part, Louise Little did a wonderful job of homeschooling her children. I'm not sure what's going on with this computer. It's plugged in. I don't know why it's saying battery low, but I will continue to do my best. So where I kind of left off was Louise Little homeschooling. Yes, she did her best. There's a book here called The Three Mothers that talks about the impact Malcolm's, Martin's, and James Baldwin.
Yeah, you got to put it in front of you. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Can you see?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Malcolm Martin and James Baldwin's mother had on them. And you can tell that the Garveyite influence ran really thick in Malcolm's blood. I mean, he took to the NOI like a fish to water. And I believe that's only because he was hearing the Garveyite teachings while he was in the womb. I mean, his mother and father embodied the very self-sufficiency that Marcus Garvey taught in their everyday lives. And Malcolm, when he grew up and came into his own, he did his very best as well to emulate what his mother and father had taught to him as a child through the Garveyite teaching. So I think most Pan-Africanist movements and most nationalist movements have actually taken a lot from Marcus Garvey, whether they acknowledge it or even know it or not. But he set a lot of the stage here in the United States and abroad as to what community and unity and Black excellence and Black empowerment looks like. So all honor to the ancestor Marcus Garvey.
Okay, so I know that you just explained to us about Marcus Garvey, but did Malcolm X receive any influence from Mr. William Edward Bogart, aka Du Bois?
So from the very little I know about W.E.B. Du Bois, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And you're asking if Malcolm got any inspiration from him?
Yes.
I don't know. I have not read that, so I can't speak as to that. I don't know if he did or not. I know that who did he look up to? No, Marcus Garvey. I don't know about that, so I won't speak on that because I don't want to give any misinformation. So if I come across that information, I'll report back to you about that.
Wow, thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
Schmeeka,
Yes.
we know that Malcolm X become a very important figure all over the world, staging regarding struggle over the dignity, equality of black people in the United States.
Hmm.
I'd like to know from you, how was Malcolm life from the birth in Omaha to his departure to New York State and Michigan?
Well, come on now. That's a whole tour, right? That's a um
To summarize this part, give us just a summary, no problem. A
okay.
summary. You don't need to go
All
the whole.
right. All right. Well, Malcolm X was born May 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. His address was 3448 Pinckney Street. He actually had um three yeah, two older brothers and an older sister when he was born here in Omaha, Nebraska. Him and his family, his mother and father, so a family of six, most likely lived in a one-room shack. We don't actually know if Malcolm lived in a one-room shack because we don't have any pictures of Malcolm's house. We don't have any blueprints or floor plans. The state of Nebraska tore down Malcolm's house July of 1965, 4 months after he was assassinated, and we have not been able to find any evidence of what his house looks like or looked like during the time that he lived here. Once again, his family was setting up their state chapter here of the UNIA, and his father was a Baptist preacher. So he would speak a lot about the UNIA across the pulpit and teach those principles to his congregation, which is what him doing that, the fact that they lived in an area here in Omaha that was supposedly whites only, and then also the fact that if you read the Dead Are Rising, it talks about Malcolm and his brothers and sisters' demeanor. They said that they did not feel like most of the other children. They didn't have that feeling of inferiority. They did not believe that the white man or white woman was better than them. So they had an aura of confidence and an aura of self-assuredness around them that most of the black children and black parents of that time, and still even in this time, do not have for themselves. So as a result of that, they were different. They stood out. They stood apart. Um, Malcolm's mother, once again, was pregnant with him when they were threatened by the KKK in 1925, and they ended up leaving shortly thereafter when Malcolm was 18 months old in 1926 by train, where they moved to Wisconsin. When they moved to Wisconsin, they ran into trouble there as well. They were once again living in an area that was not necessarily open to Black people. But the Little family did not care about that. Once again, they did not feel an inferiority complex, so they did not feel that they should have to, restrict their movements in any way. They ended up being accosted while they were in Wisconsin. Their house was, they tried to set their house on fire there while they were sleeping. They moved from Wisconsin to Mason, Michigan. And then in Michigan is where um, they moved from Mason and they moved to Detroit as well. And in Michigan is where their father in 1931, Earl Little, was found dead. Now, there are three different stories about Earl Little's death. The official one that the police gave was that he accidentally slipped on the train tracks, of course, right in front of the train somehow, and got hit by a train. The report that the coroner gave the insurance company is that the Earl Little actually committed suicide. And that was done as a way of defrauding the Little family from the insurance money on the life insurance policy that they had taken out on Earl Little. So therefore, Louise Little was not able to collect all of her insurance money. She got very little of the insurance policy that they had paid into faithfully. And then the third version, which is the one that we as a community and Malcolm also believed is that his father was effectively killed for his beliefs and for his activism on behalf of the Black community. So growing up, Malcolm actually was not a very obedient child. He was wayward. He was caught up in the streets pretty young, actually. He missed his father, and without his father's kind of heavy hand and influence, he, as a lot of our young boys do, and young girls, girls need their fathers too, ended up going out and doing a lot of things that would be considered immoral or illegal to some people. It definitely didn't help his mother. His mother was trying very hard. She had 8 children to keep food on the table. She was a very proud woman who did not want to accept any kind of state assistance, and she did not like the state in her business. So she wasn't very friendly with the state of Michigan and the kind of child protective services that they had at that time, and they did not have a good relationship. Malcolm Little and his brothers and sisters kind of eked their way out of the dirt. Their mom, unfortunately, during the Depression, 8 kids, no husband, a Black woman, had it really bad. She couldn't keep it together for them. So she was actually committed to a mental institution in the state of Michigan. And this is actually a copy. Ooh, there we go. Sorry, I'm gonna get it. This is a copy of the court order that had her committed to a mental institution. And her children were put into foster care. That happened in January of 1939 when she was committed to a mental institution. So after that, Malcolm ended up in foster care. He went through several different places. He actually still was a very smart child. He just wasn't very well behaved. So he tried to do better in some of his foster cares. I think having all the white people around him, gave him a little more pause, but eventually he ended up dropping out of school at 8th grade, specifically because he didn't have any support. He didn't have any support at school. He didn't have any support at home. And the autobiography of Malcolm X and in the movie X, it talks about how he was called the N-word so many times that he answered to it, So he ended up dropping out of school. Even though he was on his 8th grade honor roll, he had been voted 8th grade body class president, but his teacher discouraged him. His teacher told him that they'll never let a Black man be a lawyer, and he wanted to be a lawyer to kind of help avenge what he saw as an injustice that happened to his mom because of that insurance money. He knew that if they had some kind of legal representation, the insurance company would not have been able to defraud them the way they did and made their family so poor. So his dreams of being a lawyer were kind of dashed down. And I think just with all the trauma that he had went through, his dad dying, his mom being committed, being separated from his brothers and sisters, he kind of just gave up. He ended up in the streets. While he's in the streets, he, sold some marijuana. He, ran some marijuana. He supposedly kind of pimped a few women. They said he wasn't very nice to white women back then, but he kept them around. They said he was always respectful to Black women, and he would never disrespect a Black woman because Black women had it just as hard as he did. And that's the one thing about Malcolm that I appreciate, and the fact that I'm here is that Malcolm has always been an advocate of the Black woman and respecting the Black woman. And that is why I can respect him and his message and share it the way I share it with such conviction. Malcolm ended up running around with a friend by the name of Chicago Red. Other people call him St. Louis Red because he came from St. Louis. But Chicago Red ended up being Red Fox, the comedian. Malcolm found another friend by the name of Malcolm Shorty Jarvis in the movie X. If you've ever seen the movie X, then you know that Spike Lee actually plays Shorty in the movie. Him and Malcolm Shorty Jarvis started a burglary ring. Them and 2 white girls ended up getting caught. And even though it was all of their first offense, official first offense, Malcolm and Malcolm Shorty Jarvis were sentenced to 10 years hard time. The 2 white girls were given 6 months probation. Once again, indicative of the racism that our people continue to face. So while Malcolm was in prison, his brother actually introduced him to the Nation of Islam. And I think, too, that is another reason why he was receptive to the Nation of Islam, not only because the teachings were familiar and similar based off what he learned about, Pan-Africanism from his mother and father, but it was introduced to him by his blood brother, So that's influencing. He decided to accept the Nation of Islam, and as we know, he changed his name from Malcolm Little to Malcolm X to represent the fact that he didn't actually know what his heritage is, because your last name is directly connected to your heritage. And all of the Black people that are walking around in the United States and abroad with European names, such as mine, are still carrying on a legacy. And I'm changing my name, y'all. I just have to figure out what I want. So me and my girls are trying to find a name that we feel fits us as a family, and then we're going to change our slave name. Because that continues a slave master legacy. You're supposed to pass your own name down to your children, not the name of the white man that enslaved your people. So he changed his last name from Little to X to represent the fact that he didn't know what his name was. And from there, he just became, one of the world's most prolific human rights activists that we had yet to see. He went across the United States, particularly in the North, kind of teaching self-sufficiency. And a lot of people think he was hard on white people, but if you listen to his speeches, Malcolm was very hard on the Black man in particular, about how a Black man should be acting, what a Black man should be doing, how he should be thinking, how he should be protecting his family, how he should be protecting his community, how he should be protecting his woman, his children, how he should leave drugs and alcohol alone, how we should not be trying to compare ourselves to white people or fight to sit by them on a toilet stool, as Malcolm said in one of his speeches. He was very critical of us as a people because he knew that we were the only ones that had the key to our own independence. He did not depend or expect the white man or the system that we claim is our enemy or the system that we claim is set up against us to actually work in our favor. And I think a lot of times that's where we get caught up in. We get caught up in the blame game of the white man, which is true. Slavery and all of that is true. But we can't stop there. We can't stop at we were enslaved by white people. We know that. What next? And the key to that only belongs to us because they are not going to give us the keys to our freedom. They are not going to give us the keys to our empowerment. It doesn't make sense to expect who you call your enemy to work on your best behalf. So Malcolm understood that, I think, in a way that we're still trying to come to grips with as a people, with that is our responsibility to free ourselves. It is our responsibility to build our own economic structures. It is our responsibility to teach our own children. It is our responsibility to handle our own criminals. We shouldn't have to turn criminals over to the police for them to be shot in the streets. If there's something going on in our community, we have the ability to police our own communities, to control our own neighborhoods. And so that's really what Malcolm was teaching everyone. And of course, he sprinkled in a few white devils here and there, which got everyone, real upset with him. But Malcolm evolved even from that after his trip from Mecca. He literally came back from Mecca and said, I will no longer make any sweeping indictments about any one race, and that I am for truth no matter who tells it, and I am for justice no matter who it is for or against. So as Malcolm continued to evolve, then we also should look at his evolution and do that as well, because literally all skin folk are not kinfolk. There are black people that'll stab you in the back just like white folks will. And so that's why I say I don't care about titles, and I really don't even care about skin color. I fight on behalf of people who look like me, but I am willing and ready to embrace anyone who is willing and ready to embrace us. And that's kind of where I stand with that. Back to Malcolm. So thank you. Malcolm ended up making a lot of enemies with his speeches, with his message. And just to be really clear, it wasn't just his message, it was Malcolm himself. There are some people that are like a walking standard. They are a walking visual of what you should be as a person, as a human being. Malcolm was one of those people. He reminds me a lot of what people say Jesus was, and I'm sure some people might not like that, but to me, Malcolm, once again, I'm not a religious person. To me, Malcolm was a spiritual and physical embodiment of what they claimed Jesus was. Jesus cracked a whip on his enemies, right? And cleared out his father's house on God's behalf. Malcolm, did the same thing in his own way. And he lived a standard. Malcolm did not smoke. He did not drink. He did not party. He didn't cheat on his wife. He didn't lie. He lived a life, I think, that convicted everyone around him, including those in the Nation of Islam. It's no secret. And, I love the NOI, power to the people, don't come for me. This is just historical record that there was, corruption happening in the Nation of Islam while Malcolm was there. Also, we know that Elijah Muhammad was having sex with 13, 14-year-old girls. That's illegal. You can't do that. It's damaging to little girls to do that. That's effectively rape. Malcolm is the only man or even woman that I know that would literally confront a national and global leader like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad about his behavior. He is the only man I know that would willingly step down or even take a risk of losing his position of fame and power because little girls were being taken advantage of. Malcolm was just a person whose level of integrity was so high that they really couldn't even get him on anything, the FBI. The FBI, as they were surveilling Malcolm, said that he was the most moral and upstanding citizen that they had ever observed. And that kind of thing is why I believe that Malcolm was hated so much. Not just because he sprinkled white devil here and there, not just because he talked about self-defense, but because he was a righteous man that lived a righteous life, and that shined a mirror on a lot of people who were living unrighteously within the NOI, without the NOI, the government, and in the public, and in the press. And so they tried to demonize him and assassinate him in the same similar fashion they did Jesus, and that's effectively what happened. Unfortunately, he was killed by another black man. The white man didn't kill Malcolm. A black man killed Malcolm. And a lot of people would be like, well, he was a tool of the white man. Well, black men, we can't be tools for the white man. Black women, we can't be tools for the white woman. We have to be cohesive and collective and empowered in ourselves. Malcolm found that out, the hard way. He left the NOI and he was broke. He was penniless. The NOI was basically providing the needs for their family. So he had to leave his home, which was provided by the NOI. He had to give back his vehicle, which was provided by the NOI. He wasn't even rich when he was with the NOI. He was still living very frugally, him and his children, his 4 children at the time. the NOI was making all of this money across the United States, Malcolm was not taking part of any of that, and that was part of the corruption that has been documented to have happening during Malcolm's stay within the NOI. So when he left the NOI, he was actually financed by his half sister Ella. You know, it's always a black woman there to make sure our brothers are okay. And that was the same for Malcolm. His half sister is the one that financed his trip to Mecca. His half sister is the one that allowed him to travel across the United States and to give the speeches that he gave from Omaha to New York. It was his half sister actually that even raised him from the ages of about 14. He went to go stay with her. And she's the one that instilled a lot into him that also made him the man that he was. Malcolm, after his trip to Mecca, once again, went through that evolvement of understanding that this is more of a spiritual battle, not one that has anything necessarily to do with a natural thing like our skin. This is a spiritual battle. And when he gave his last speech in the Audubon Ballroom, he knew something was wrong. He knew something was wrong on that day, February 19th. No, February 21st, 1925. He knew that something was off, but he was determined, I believe, to see his course through. He was a man of his word. And I think the people who killed him knew that. They banked on Malcolm being there because they knew Malcolm said he would be. And as a man of his word, he did what he said he was going to do. Unfortunately, of course, he was gone too soon. He had just started the OAAU, the Organization of Afro-American Unity. He was looking to get more politically involved. He was looking to sue the United States on behalf of Black people for genocide and war crimes. They knew all of this when they killed Malcolm. They effectively killed a movement, and they did the same thing again with Martin Luther King, and they did the same thing again with the Black Panthers and Huey P. Newton and all of the rest of them. And if they didn't assassinate them in flesh, they assassinated their character. You know, they assassinated their spirit. And we've just kind of gotten tired of dealing with all of that. So I don't even believe in Black leaders. I don't want any one person to stand up and say, I am the leader of the Blacks, you know, because that makes you a target. You are not going to last long as a leader of Black people. What I want us all to do is all be leaders in the way that we can and have been equipped divinely to lead. And then we can depend on each other to carry this movement forward instead of always putting all of our eggs in the basket of one man or one woman. And so when that person is targeted or assassinated, then the movement itself falls. The movement is of the people. It's always been for the people, by the people. And Malcolm definitely wanted to embody that by uniting 22 million Afro-Americans here in the United States. Unfortunately, he didn't get a chance to finish any of that work, but you know, I believe all of us are here to be Malcolms. If you've ever seen the movie X, at the end of it, it has all these kids and elderly and adults that stand up and say, I am Malcolm X. And that's how I feel. I feel that Malcolm X is more than just a person. He's a spirit. He's a legacy. He is an example and a standard for us to follow. And I don't know. That's why I admire him, and I'm willing to do the work that I can to make sure his legacy is honored as such. So that's Malcolm in a nutshell.
Wow. It's incredible. And just to take in this information that you brought to us, we would like to know that you mentioned about the NOI, and we want to know something because we are a sports channel. Mm-hmm. And we are trying to bring this kind of things. Mm-hmm. But sports and arts in general have always been part of what they call in international relations soft power. If you see all of the big sports events, it has always been a great weapon of power and a sports wash. We can describe like distraction through entertainment.
I mean, look at Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was a national figurehead for Black people and a figure of freedom for Black people simply because he can knock people out. So that soft power, it packs a real hard punch. I agree with that.
Perfect. Just to give an example, in 1936, Jesse Owens slammed the Aryan sovereignty proposal inside the Munich Olympic Stadium in Germany. We would like to know, did Malcolm X play any sports in his life?
Actually, he did, but sports wasn't really his thing. His brother was more of a boxer than he was. So he played a little boxing and he played a little basketball, but he was better off with his mouth than he was kind of with his hands. He was kind of a more ganglier type youth, and he didn't have a lot of that rhythm and coordination that is needed in sports. So him and Martin Luther King did very well to be orators, right? Because they'd have just been knocked out all the time in the ring because Malcolm wasn't for it. They said he actually, let me find it.
Oh, they have a sword, and the sword was the tongue.
Life and death is in the power of the tongue. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So yeah, Malcolm did some boxing and Malcolm played some basketball. And I think he was actually better at basketball than he was at boxing. But he wasn't a big sports person, no.
Oh. How was the approach, and you mentioned it, in relationship with Muhammad Ali?
To me, that's such a sad ending to a beautiful brotherhood. And I am not, of course, I am not the know all to be all on Malcolm X. I know what I know, and I will share what I know, right? There are definitely more people more knowledgeable about me than Malcolm X, including our board president, Leo Lewis. He is, to me, almost Malcolm X reincarnated here. He has kind of that same spirit and that same standard of living. Doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, faithful to his wife. All of those kind of standards that made Malcolm the man that he was, I see a lot of that in Leo. So maybe when we come back around to this conversation, I can have Leo on and you can talk to him more in depth about some of these topics. But as far as Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, has anyone seen the documentary Blood Brothers on Netflix?
On Netflix, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I saw.
I mean, I don't know much more than what they would have told you there strictly from, the research those historians have done. What I do know of Malcolm X is that it hurt his heart to see his relationship with Muhammad Ali be destroyed because of the rift of what was happening during the Nation of Islam. Also, have y'all got a chance to see One Night in Miami, written by Regina King? Yep.
Oh.
That is a really good one. It has Malcolm X, Al Green, Jim Brown, and Muhammad Ali.
Yes, I saw that one. Yes, I saw.
Okay.
I saw.
I love that movie because it shows Malcolm's humanity, right? And of course, this is all creative license, but still, it was really good to see Malcolm as a human being and not just this stoic, civil rights figure. And so looking at his relationship with Muhammad Ali as a human being, I feel like he was really hurt. He was really hurt. That was a loss for him. In his mind and in his spirit. I think that he maybe even blamed the Nation of Islam for the rift that happened between him and Muhammad Ali. I believe that Muhammad Ali had regrets later in life that he's actually spoken, this is documented, that he wished, he could have had a chance to repair that relationship. I think Malcolm changed Muhammad Ali's life, though. I mean, he literally would not have been Muhammad Ali if it wasn't for Malcolm. Malcolm is the one that kind of brought him into the fold of the Nation of Islam and gave him more of the confidence to be the black man in the ring that he was. So it's just really sad what happened to those two men. And, it's kind of not a warning, but, just be aware of the outside entities and influences that can tear you apart from the people you love.
That's correct. Wow. Hey, Schmeeka,
Yes.
That segregation is a part of U.S. for a long time. However, in U.S. have produced notable difference in different times, like Frederick Douglass, Kenneth Clark, and his wife, Mamie Clark, many others celebration. Since we are celebrating the month of his birthday, Malcolm X birthday month, I would like to know from you, how was Malcolm X's relationship with Martin Luther King Jr.?
Okay, I meant to bring my photo, but I couldn't find it. So everybody recalls that picture of Malcolm and Martin smiling and holding hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, I'm gonna pull it up for you.